Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to fix sticky resin. Sticky resin can either occur when you haven't mixed the resin properly, well enough, or you haven't got the correct ratio. So I'm going to show you how to fix some sticky resin, some sticky spots. So unfortunately I rushed this piece, and the problem that I've got is that I didn't mix all the resin correctly. I got the ratio right because there's sections of it which are completely hard, so I obviously got the ratio correct, otherwise the whole piece would kind of be a bit sticky. But I think there are certain points that I didn't mix the resin correctly, so therefore I've got this sticky bit around here where my finger really sticks to it. And I'll do some close-up shots now for you to see. Now, as you can see, I have some wet spots here where it hasn't dried correctly. This, and actually when you touch it, it is still sticky. And this I literally did about 5 days ago, and it's not going to, and it's really sticky. It's not going to dry, basically. I mean, this bit down here is completely rock solid, so it seems to only be this little section here that has caused a problem for me. So I'm gonna teach you how to fix this issue. Now, what I think happened is that I mixed the resin together in one of these buckets here, and I've been looking up lots of forums and seeing why sticky resin occurs, and the problem that most people make is when they're mixing, they don't actually scrape the sides, they just kind of mix in the middle. Therefore the resin in the middle is correctly mixed, but there's some unmixed resin, tends to be more resin than hardener on the outside, so when you're using your stick to kind of scrape bits out and put it on the piece, you're getting unmixed resin, so that's why you can get wet spots. They also say just to kind of mix the resin and get the sides and the bottom, but also when you're pouring, just to pour and not use a stick to scrape out the sides, because even when you mix really well you can still get points that aren't mixed correctly. Now, if you do get some sticky sections, you can wait for a couple of days to see if it will harden, but if it doesn't harden by the 3rd or 4th day, it needs to be strong enough to hear your nails or to be able to sort of dig a nail in a bit and it doesn't create an indent in the painting. Now, if you do have sticky sections, don't just re-pour over the sticky section, because it will actually, even if the next lot of resin is correctly mixed, you can't just pour straight over the wet section because it can actually seep through and still be a wet section. You actually need to properly sand it down and do the tips that I'm going to tell you today. So what you're going to need is, I've just got some cocktail sticks here, and this is to scrape off like most of the wet resin so you're not left with too much. So I'm just going to scrape off the really wet bits here. Depends, if your piece isn't that wet, then you might not need to do this section, but you'll actually see on the camera that I'm able to scrape off a fair amount of mine. So I'm just going to carry on scraping that off. Okay, so when you think most of the actual wet stuff is off, what I'm next going to use is some sandpaper just to coarse that section up, because it's still sticky, even though it's not got much resin left on it. So I've got some sandpaper here. I've got two different types, one that's a bit coarser than the other, but I'm going to start with a fine one first just to see if I can get most of it out with that. So I'm just going to cut the sandpaper. So I've got a nice little square of this. I'm going to fold it in half and then in quarters, and I'm just going to gently start to scrape this across the wet section. Okay, so I've had a pretty good go at this, maybe for about 10 minutes, just sanding down those areas. Now don't worry if it kind of scratches up a bit of your painting, because you're just going to cover it again and it should fill in all those scratches, so you shouldn't be able to see it once it's finished. Maybe if it's a darker painting you might want to stick to the finer sandpaper because it might show up a bit more in the darker colours. But on the lighter colours, it should pretty much cover it okay. I'm just going to show you a close-up of what it looks like now. Okay, so it does look like a bit of a mess. But hopefully should turn out alright. I've got the most of that was the section that was most sticky, so I've had to sort of take it down to the actual painting there underneath. And then this bit around it, there was a little bit there, but again, these kind of scratches should not show once the whole thing's covered. I pretty much made it so it's not sticky anymore. It's a little bit kind of, it doesn't feel completely smooth, but anyway, it's not really sticky. You might get points that are still, that you can't get the stickiness off, but as long as most of the resin that was sticky has been removed. Those sections that I've got larger indents here will obviously need more resin, but I'm going to coat the whole thing so that it's one nice layer. So yeah, what I'm going to do next is mix my resin. Okay, so this is the resin that I use. It's called ArtResin. You've got the resin and the hardener here. You need exact measurements of both. So kind of guess how much I need. I'm probably going to do up to the top ridge of this cup. I think that should be enough to coat the whole thing. If I need more, I can always mix up more. Okay, so I'm going to pour my resin into 1 cup here. And then I'm going to use the hardener, same amount in this cup here. Next I'm going to pour it into my bigger cup here, and I want to make sure that obviously all of it comes out of the cup. You can just use one of these spatulas again to get out, make sure that everything is. Now if you want in detail a bit more instructions on how to apply resin to a painting, I've got another tutorial which I'll link in the description below and on the screen now, and that one I put in a bit more detail about how I mix the resin. And just to say, I'm not a professional resin artist, I've kind of learnt this on the go, so everything that I'm showing you today is just trial and error. It's not necessarily the right thing to do, it's just what I've found helps me to fix my artwork and different techniques that I've learned along the way. So please don't quote me on anything, it's just what's worked for me basically. But I am always keen to hear from other resin artists and get some help and tips from them as well. So if you are a resin artist, please comment in the description below and let me know how you get on with sticky resin and how you sort your stuff out. Okay, they're both in here now, and what I've just got is just a piece of wood here that I'm just going to use to mix it. So I do mix mine for a good 5 minutes now because I'm always worried about unmixed resin. It is so annoying when you get sticky spots and when you have to redo it. It's a lot time consuming and resin costs a lot of money obviously. So I do try and mix it really thoroughly, really try and scrape around the edges, around the bottom, make sure you get every single section of it covered, otherwise you will get problems. So I'm just going to mix for a good 5 minutes and we'll carry on after that. Okay, so I've mixed the resin for a good 5 minutes. So now I'm going to pour on the work here. I'm going to start with the section that I've sanded down, just to make sure that I have enough to kind of fill it in a bit. What I'm going to use to spread it out is just an old like debit card, credit card, whatever, and you can use that to swipe across the painting. You want to make sure that the level is all really smooth. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Just using the card to swipe it across, and you'll be able to feel if there's any indents, so you just want to make sure that there's no dips or anything in the resin when you're swiping it across. Okay, so I've done a rough first layer. I'm going to use my torch to get the bubbles out. So there are still some dents that I can see along here. So what I'm going to do is just let it settle for about a couple of minutes before I put some extra resin on it. So I'm just adding extra to the section that was indented, just to make sure that I won't get any dip in the final result. So I've finished resining this piece, and what I'm going to do is show you how it looks once it's dry. Okay, so it's a little while later and the resin has dried. So in terms of this is the section that we had a problem with. It's rock hard now, so there's no problems with it being wet. One thing I did see on a forum was that some epoxy has a waxy feeling when cured, and it will gum up sandpaper, so they wash it with dish soap and hot water, and that makes it easier to sand. So I probably would have tried that if I'd have known that, just because it was very sticky. But if you guys try it, let me know how you get on in the comments below. Thanks for watching this tutorial today. Please hit the subscribe button, and I hope to see you all soon. Bye!